Amen. Today we're going to take a look at a phrase that parents sometimes say to their children, but more importantly, what lies beyond that and why they might say that. We have an epidemic in this country. It's grown and grown over the last few years, and it's something called bullying. And you say, oh, that might just be important to kids and to parents of kids, but quite honestly, that has spread into our whole culture, and we'll talk a little bit about that near the end of the sermon. But it's so important to take a look at this, and I would guess, if I was to ask you to raise your hands in here, that many of you would admit to it sometime in your life being bullied. And if you were real honest, a couple of you might admit to being bullies. We won't ask which ones. Don't raise your hand on this, John, okay? But we have to look at that, and it's important to take a look for several reasons. I just want to share one little brief personal story with you as I begin the message today. I was a victim of bullying, and I can remember it to this day. I still remember it. I was in about 5th grade, and I still, by the way, as I get to the end of the story, I'm not happy with the outcome of this story. I'm not proud about the outcome of this story, so I don't want you to get the wrong idea when I end the story. When I was about 5th grade, there was a boy that tormented me. And on the walk home from school, remember those days when we walked to our neighborhood schools, and some of you still do, but I can remember being bullied in all kinds of different ways, verbally, physically, just like throwing things and doing all kinds of terrible things. And I was raised in a way that even though we weren't in the church, we were kind of taught that you just had to ignore people like that. And that does work to a point. But month after month after month, you get to a point where that just doesn't work anymore. And I can remember at the very day, and it was one of those spring days in the Midwest when the snow is still around but the sun's out, and I can remember this young man, his name was Billy, had taken a snowball, and you could really make great snowballs in those because then they get icy. And when he hit me in the ear with the snowball, it really, really hurt. And my response, totally unprepared, I would have never had any idea that I would do something like this, but I literally attacked Billy and got on top of him and pummeled him for 10 minutes until somebody in a house came out and drugged me off. And quite honestly, I had blood all over my hands, and I am not proud of that this day. But I'm just saying, there are 2 aspects of bullying right there. It created in me a violence that I wasn't proud of, and I'm not proud of to this day. But the whole act was so terrible. I just want to share some things with you today. It's going to be a little different kind of message because of that. I'm going to share with you what bullying is to start with. I mean, we think we know, but I want to just kind of define it for us. Bullying is unwanted aggressive behavior. It involves a power imbalance. It's repeated over time. It can be physical, doesn't have to be. We can have access to some embarrassing information about you, and I can bully you with that information. It also has to do with popularity or bringing your popularity down, and it seems to always have the goal of doing harm to other people. That's what bullying's about. Verbal bullying can be teasing, name-calling, inappropriate sexual comments, taunting, and threats to cause harm. Social bullying, and this happens a lot, by the way, even with adults, it's leaving someone out intentionally. It's telling others not to be friends with someone. It's spreading rumors and gossip about people, and sometimes it's embarrassing them in public. Physical bullying, of course, involves the hitting, the kicking, the pinching, the spitting, tripping, all of those things, taking someone's things from them, breaking their things, being mean or making rude gestures to them. And this is what I wanted to share with you today, because this was a big learning curve for me. And the National Society for Prevention lists some tactics now of cyberbullying. And we've heard about that on the news more recently, where that's done with the internet, but not only the internet, but with texting. That's part of that. And some of the things, this is what happens with that way of bullying people. They pretend to be other people than they are when they're online to trick people, and then they spread lies and rumors about their victims. They trick people into revealing personal information that they share with others. They send forward or mean messages and text messages. And they post pictures of their victims without consent. They do all kinds of things. Now, I want to give you some statistics, and if they don't shock you, they should. And the first of those is that right now, about 29%, 3 out of 10 youth between the 4th grade and 8th grade, before high school, report that they've been bullied. 3 out of 10 report that they've been bullied. Now this survey, this other survey I'm going to quote, I have to tell you, it's really dated. It's the only one I could find. So I want you to think about this. This was based on 2004, and it's about cyberbullying. Now think about the difference between 2004 and now. Because how many teenagers now have cell phones that didn't have them almost 10 years ago? So the access to bullying is now, the percentages have to be even greater. But in 2004, 42% of those surveyed admitted to being bullied online. 35% admit to being threatened online. 21% have received mean messages. 58% said that someone had said something mean or very, very hurtful to them online. And finally, 58% never tell their parents. 58% never tell their parents. It's one of the reasons we're having this message today. Because it's not just about giving you some horrible statistics. It's not just about telling you something bad is happening in our culture and our society. It's saying to all of us, let's do something about it. Let's move on this. Let's act on this. Let's not take it anymore. It's so significant. You know what some of the damages are from bullying? People can feel intimidated. There can be emotional damage. And of course, one of the things we see more and more this day is people committing suicide because of being cyberbullied or having something spread, rumor about them online, and it's just so devastating to them that they can't imagine they can ever overcome it. So the damage is there, the damage is for all of us, but the damage is not just for young people, the damage is to our culture, to our society. Because this trend of bullying has spread across our culture, and maybe always been there, I don't know. But maybe because of television and the internet and all of those things today, the bullying that occurs from people that should know better, people in places of power and prestige, people that used to be able to help our society are now pushing things the other way. Think about bullying from radio and television personalities. They love to get on their little bully pulpit, might I say, and they attack people. And by the way, I'm talking about both sides, so this is not a political thing. But it's saying about those kind of folks that continually raise their voice to speak louder than their opponent and to make innuendos. It's great to be on the radio or television and to make innuendos about people who can't respond, that don't have the access to respond the way you are beating them up. It's great to be in those places and spread half-truths about people or half-truths about fact. And then people just latch onto those things too often. And we have this whole culture now that that's the way to approach things. It's even become that way. I mean, politics is almost exclusively that way, isn't it? I mean, we don't have any honest debate in politics anymore. We have posturing and sound bites and bullying others and talking about how bad they are. You know, I don't know how you feel about this. I know how I feel about it. I just had this discussion, and Lynette Lewis is not here today because of her uncle passing away, but we had this discussion about the way we were raised to respect the people in office, and even if you didn't like that person, you were taught to respect the office. What happened to that? It's gone. I was never so embarrassed to be living in Arizona than a couple of weeks ago when the president was here. Now, do I like the president? That's a long story. We don't need to go there. But I will tell you this. There were a group of Arizonans who gathered around, and what they did was they sang. You know what they sang? Bye bye black sheep. How do you feel about this? Does it embarrass you? The President of the United States, doesn't matter what political party they are, doesn't matter if you voted for them or not, doesn't matter if you don't like anything they ever did or not. There used to be a respect for the office. But now we bully everybody, we even bully our presidents. And this is a spread across our culture. I've seen it at school board meetings. I wish Bob Rice has gone this weekend to Ohio to visit his mother. And I'm thinking, man, there's a guy that can tell us about what happens at school board meetings. Where I grew up in Indiana, there was always bullying at school board meetings, and it was always about firing the basketball coach. You know, I have to tell you this aside. I grew up in Indiana. The joke was, you know, when it comes to high school basketball coaches, there are only two kinds: those that are looking for a job and those that will be. Because they were never happy, and if you didn't play a certain kid, you were bullied, and people would go to school board meetings. And it happens even in churches. It happens when we gather in our small groups and gossip. When we don't confront things openly and honestly, when there should be conflict that's open and open discourse, but instead we don't do it that way. We do it behind the scenes. We do it with our little groups. And we try to bully someone, whether it's the trustees to get exactly done what we want, or the pastor, it doesn't matter. But we do the same things. We have become the culture. I understood when I went into the ministry that the church was to be counterculture. We were to not be like the culture, but to set the example that Jesus set for us and to show the way. I have an example of bullying from a church, and this is an old one, but I just like this one so well I wanted to share it with you. It's from the First Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. And in 1970, they had a young woman named Twyla and her mother Winfred that started coming to church, and they were black. And they were open enough to say, okay, we're going to let you come to church. But then they wanted to join the church. And 4 separate times, they were denied membership by a vote of the church. And finally, on a given Sunday, a layperson influential in that congregation stood up. His name was Dr. Vern Williamson, and he invited them down front to join the church. 300 people left the church in their act of public bullying because they allowed black people to join their church. That church is still a Baptist church. It's no longer a Southern Baptist church. They became an independent Baptist church and said, we're leading the way. We're going to integrate. We're going to have people. We're not going to be bullied. We are followers of Jesus Christ. We're going to stand up and do something the right way. What can we do? That's really the question for today, isn't it? You're going to take communion in a few minutes. And I really hope as you come forward, you might see God to empower you. And I always remembered a line from, you know me, I'm a movie nut, and you all know that. In the movie Hoosiers, there's basketball coaches, and the coach fires the assistant coach. And when he fires the assistant coach, he's mad as can be. And he looks at the coach and he says, you know, there are 2 kinds of crazy. He said, there's the guy that gets drunk and takes off all of his clothes and howls at the moon. And then there's the guy that does the same thing, but he does it in your front yard. He said, the first you can ignore, the second you have to deal with. I want to say to you today, we need to deal with all bullying in our culture, for our kids, for our grandkids. And so one of the first things, parents, grandparents, talk to your kids. Try to get them to open up. They're not going to want to, but try to get them to open up. As I told you earlier, 58% never tell their parents. Try to get them to open up so you can be an advocate for them. You see, you have to understand, too, that you can have your kids open up about other kids because it is important to us. We don't want to ignore bullies. We don't want to ignore anyone else being bullied. What we can do publicly, we can start turning off our television and radio when we hear those people getting so obnoxious and bullying others. We could refuse to do it ourselves. I mean, that would be a great start, wouldn't it? If we didn't gossip or we didn't talk behind people's backs, if we said, no, I'm not doing that. If we got a problem with you, we're just going to talk about it. Wow, what an innovative concept. It would be great for all of us, wouldn't it? We can begin to listen to the words of Jesus who said, you remember that we love our neighbor, and who's our neighbor? Everyone. So who should be bullying their neighbor? And we should remember the words of James, who warned us that bullying is just not pushing or shoving, it's using the tongue in a malicious way, and James reminds us of that. So there are things, very practical things we can do, and they start with first of all, looking at how we're living our lives. And are we setting a good example, or are we just like falling right in with the culture? Today I want to invite you to do something. I want to invite you to be countercultural. To say, I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm not going to join that side. I'm going to stand up for what's right. And sometimes standing up for what's right means turning something off. It means walking away. It means finding a child. It means watching what's happening. You have an opportunity to make a difference in the world. That's what Christians are called to do. To make a difference in the world. This is your chance. And I'm inviting you to make a commitment today as you come forward to God, to yourself, and to the church, that you're just not going to take it anymore. Thanks be to God for the opportunity. Amen.